Have you ever heard a sound that's so unique, so iconic, that it practically is the brand? A sound that can tell you a whole story about near death and an absolutely glorious resurrection? Well, today we're diving into a comeback story for the ages, and it's all powered by one single, unmistakable sound.
Oh yeah, that's it. That is the heartbeat. For decades, you could hear this sound echoing through the highest mountain passes and the most gridlocked city streets in India. You know, it's not the high-pitched scream of a superbike, it's something way deeper, almost kind of primal. It's the sound of a Royal Enfield, and it was a deliberate choice to sound like absolutely nothing else on the road.
And that is the billion-dollar question we are unpacking today. How on earth did a brand that was, and I'm not kidding, a literal punchline for being unreliable, this old relic, how did it rise from its own ashes to completely dominate its market and leave global giants scratching their heads in the dust? Well, the answer is a total masterclass in strategy.
To really get how huge this victory was, you first have to understand just how close Royal Enfield came to completely disappearing. This wasn't just a bad quarter. This was a brand on its very last breath.
So, welcome to what we'll call the dark ages of Royal Enfield. After its British parent company went belly up, the Indian division was kind of left on its own. And, well, it was not going well. The brand became infamous, a total joke among riders, known way more for its problems than for its cool heritage.
And when I say it was a joke, I mean it. These flaws were legendary. Owners used to say you could always find a Royal Enfield by just following the trail of oil it left behind. That kickstart, it was a brutal rite of passage that could and did literally break your ankle. This was not a bike for the average Joe. You basically had to be a part-time mechanic just to keep the thing running.
And here's the thing, that just wasn't sustainable. By the early 2000s, sales had completely hit rock bottom. The parent company, Eicher Motors, was just bleeding cash and was seriously considering shutting the whole thing down for good. The end was right there. That iconic thump was about to go quiet.
But then, right as they were about to pull the plug, one person saw things a little differently. He heard the soul inside that thump and decided to bet everything on bringing it back to life.
And that person was Siddhartha Lal. He was the young leader of the parent company. And more importantly, he was a passionate biker himself. He saw past all the oil leaks and the busted ankles. He saw a brand that had a soul, a legacy that you just can't manufacture in a boardroom. He actually went to the board and convinced them to give him one last shot to turn it all around.
And his plan? It was absolutely brilliant in how simple it was. Step 1, fix the machine. Make it reliable so it actually works. But, and this is the most important part, step 2, keep the soul. Do not lose that thump. Then the big pivot. Step 3, stop selling a product and start selling a lifestyle, an identity. And finally, the masterstroke. Build a cult, a community so tight-knit that it becomes your best marketing. And this, right here, this is the core of it. This was the huge mental shift. They knew they could never beat Japanese bikes on performance or the Europeans on tech, so they just changed the game. They stopped selling transportation and started selling the dream of the open road of adventure. You weren't just buying a bike anymore, you were buying into a story. You were becoming a rider. So how do you actually build a cult? Well, you give people a place to belong. Royal Enfield created these huge iconic events, like a pilgrimage up to the Himalayas. These were less about marketing and more like giant tribal gatherings. Dealerships became community hubs, organizing weekly rides. All of a sudden, owning an Enfield meant you had a weekend plan and a whole new group of friends. They weren't just selling motorcycles, they were selling a brotherhood.
Okay, and this is where the story gets really juicy. This new strategy, powered by community, was about to face the ultimate test, because the global giants, they were coming.
Right. So when the legendary Harley-Davidson announced it was entering India, the world's biggest motorcycle market, the writing seemed to be on the wall. All the analysts, all the experts, pretty much everyone predicted, well, that's it. Game over. The old Indian legend was about to get crushed by the American icon. But here's the catch. They were all completely wrong. Not only did Royal Enfield survive, it absolutely thrived. It systematically dismantled the competition, forcing huge brands like Harley-Davidson to pretty much retreat from the market. So, what in the world happened? Okay, so let's break down how they pull this off. First, price. Royal Enfield was the attainable dream. It was the first real big bike for India's growing middle class. Harley, it was an impossible toy, a super expensive machine for the ultra-wealthy.
Then there's the bike itself. Enfields were built for bumpy Indian roads. Harleys were built for smooth American highways, totally impractical in city traffic. But here's the knockout punch, the emotional connection. Royal Enfield tapped into nostalgia, heritage, and that community we talked about. Harley was just selling chrome and an American dream that didn't really connect. Royal Enfield had built a tribe, and the competition had no way to fight that.
So, what's the big lesson here? What's the ultimate takeaway? It's about building a defense that your competitors can't just buy their way through. It's about building something called an emotional moat.
Think about it like this. You know how a castle has a moat, a physical barrier of water to keep enemies out? An emotional moat is the same idea, but it's invisible. It's built from shared memories on group rides, the pride of owning a piece of history, that feeling of belonging to a tribe. See, Harley-Davidson could build a better engine, they could lower their price, but they couldn't just create a brotherhood overnight. That was Royal Enfield's fortress.
And that really is the heart of it all. In a world that is obsessed with the latest features and the newest tech, Royal Enfield won by looking backward, by leaning into its history. They understood a fundamental truth. People don't just buy what you do, they buy why you do it. They weren't just buying a product, they were buying a story and a place where they could belong.
And that leaves us with one big question, and this one's for you. Whether you're building a startup or a personal brand or even just a small community, it's not just about what you make or what you do. It's about the story you tell and the identity you offer people. Because as Royal Enfield proved, a powerful story might just be the greatest competitive advantage you could ever have.